Radio Migrante every Sunday night from 9 to 10 p.m. on CHRY 105.5 FM.
Magandang gabi po sa lahat ng nakikinig dito lamang sa Radyo Migrante sa CHRY 105.5 FM, your leading source for diversity. At maaari nyo rin kaming mapakinggan sa www.rdo.co/CHRY, Bell 5973 o sa Rogers Digital Cable 945 or sa tunein.com kung may mga smartphones kayo. So ngayon pong gabi ay makakasama ninyo ay yung tagapanglingkod na si Rhea Gamana at si Ishmael Cabanya and Jason Reyes. Hello mga kaibigan, kumusta?
Mabuti.
Bakit parang tahimik kayo?
Oh, it's your day, right? Women's Day.
Well, it's not just my day, but for all the women out there who are listening at sa buong mundo.
Yeah.
Dito lamang sa Radyo Migrante.
We're giving you full control tonight.
Well, yung mga guests natin ang magkakaroon ng full control. Kumbaga, dahil sila yung makakausap natin kung siguro yung buong history ng IWD at ano ba yung relevance ng IWD sa modern context.
Yeah, because yesterday, right? There was a march downtown here in Toronto and different parts of the globe. Mm-hmm. It's getting bigger every year, I guess.
Mm-hmm. At saka makakasama din natin gabi ay si Connie Sorio ng International Women's Alliance at si Evelyn Kalugay ng Pinay, Quebec. Isa po siyang Filipino women's organization na nag-empower at saka nag-organisa ng mga Filipino women, particularly sa Filipino domestic workers doon po sa Montreal, Quebec. So makakasama po natin sila live via phone patch ngayong gabi. Siguro bago tayo mag-proceed doon sa ating interview, ay news and information muna tayo. So sinong mauna?
Okay, so ang balita natin para ngayong gabi, Filipino family murdered, buried in a shallow grave. And this is actually a very disturbing news that just came about, I believe, 2 days ago. A father and his sons were reported missing and had been found dead and buried in a shallow grave in the northern Filipino province of Abra. Rogelio Ligio, 68, his son Eddie, 35, and Freddy, 30, were reported missing since March 1 until the discovery recently of the mass grave by soldiers and local in the village of Mugao in the town of Likwan, Baay. The military has quickly blamed the murder of the trio to the communist rebel group New People's Army, saying Freddy Ligio was a former guerrilla who surrendered to the government in March of 2011, and that he was murdered by the rebel along his father and brother for betraying the communist movement. The discovery of the mass grave was brought about by the trust and confidence of the populace to the army and the police. This is a clear manifestation of the internal peace and security plan Bayanihan, that all people are responsible in achieving peace. This only shows that the army and the police are the true protector of the people in Likwan Baay, Abra, in a military statement said. But the League of Filipino Students and the youth group Anak Bayan, into which Freddy Ligao is also known as Fermin, was a member, has accused the 41st Infantry Battalion of murdering him and his family and condemned the brutal killings.
Furthermore, Joe Abueg of the League of Filipino Students said in a statement which is sent to the regional newspaper Mindanao Examiner, in quotes, he, referring to Freddy Ligao, along with his father and elder brother, was gagged, tied up, killed, and then buried in a shallow grave where they were discovered. Abueg said Freddy Ligao was supposed to give a testimony on how the military forcibly used him as a guide and more likely as a shield by government troops in their operations against the NPA. In quotes, given the recent attacks in the mainstream media by members of the Philippine military against Anak Bayan, there's clearly only one group in this entire country with an interest in assassinating its members and the progressive youth. Under the Oplan Bayanihan, the U.S. Aquino regime continues to perpetrate heinous crimes such as this. President Aquino is desperate in quelling the growing discontent and rage of the people brought about by his pro-elite, pro-foreign, and anti-people policies. Aquino's PR stunts and cheap media gimmicks to fool the youth and the people are not working anymore. This is precisely the reason why, just like his predecessors, Aquino is more than willing to employ violence and rely on the mercenary traditions of the armed forces to shut his critics, Abueg said. Wadagan said government troops also searched other houses in the area and violated the rights of innocent villagers. He said In quotes, this incident unmasked the never-changing true character of the armed forces, counterinsurgency or internal security operations. Illegal searches, interrogation, detention, and intimidation are acts concomitant with AFP operations that terrorize the populace and are clear violations of human rights and international humanitarian laws, which are condoned by the reactionary civilian government officials.
So ito po yung isang news item natin kung saan nagsalita si Monique Wilson hinggil doon sa issue ng Hacienda Luisita. So ito po.
Number one priority po sa atin sa 1 Billion Rising Philippines for Justice campaign ang economic violence. Ay ang unang perpetrator natin ay ang Presidente Aquino at ang call to action natin ay managot siya sa ating mga kababaihan, sa kanyang criminal neglect, sa kanyang kapabayaan, sa ating mga kababaihan, sa kanyang oppression, sa kanyang walang puso at walang compassion na hindi niya binibigay sa ating mga kababaihan at kabataan. At ang gusto ko lang ipaabot sa inyo, bilang Global Director ng 1 Billion Rising, 207 countries po ang nakilahok sa 1 Billion Rising for Justice sa buong mundo. Karamihan po sa mga bansang ito, lupa din, land reform din ang kanilang nilalaban. Nakakonect po tayo sa napakakaming bansa na na-oppress din po dahil sa mga land issues at sa kahirapan. At ang gusto kong ipabot sa inyo, at isisigaw po natin sa plataformang 1 Billion Rising for Justice ang mga issues ninyo dito sa Hacienda Luisita. Ikatawin natin global at international hanggang ipahiya natin ang ako, ang imo, pamilya at ang ating presidente sapagkat hindi na po acceptable ang ginagawa nila sa inyo. At kami, ang sa tingin namin, meron din po kaming contribution at meron kaming role na kailangang i-play. Kung saan i-amplify po namin ang mga boses ninyo sa 1 Billion Rising for Justice po ay nasa likod ninyo. Iyan po ang promise namin. Hindi ko kami hihinto hanggat maglaman ng buong mundo kung anong nangyayari sa inyo dito sa Hacienda Luisita. Ang sinasabi natin sa ating gobyerno ay hindi tayo hihinto. Hindi tayo hihinto isigaw, sakayaw, at magmamarcha, at magkikisa hanggat nakuha natin ang hustisya.
You've heard a clip from YouTube of Monique Wilson speaking about the fight of the Hacienda Luisita, mostly women, and she's a world-class Filipino actress and global director for 1 Billion for Rising Justice campaign. And you're still listening to Radyo Migrante on CHRY 155 FM, your leading source for diversity.
News, interviews, and commentary on the Filipino struggle from the home front, Canada, and around the world. You're listening to Radio Migrante on CHRY 105.5 FM.
So ngayon pong gabi, kung kayo po ay nakaka-tune in nyo lang, ay pag-uusapan po natin ang International Women's Day as we are commemorating the 104th year of its commemoration. Since its inception, paano po ba related ang International Women's Day sa modern context? So makakasama po natin ngayon upang tulungan tayo sa issue ito, upang mapag-usapan ng issue, ay si Connie Sorio mula po sa International Women's Alliance at si Evelyn Kalugay ng Pinay, Quebec. So magandang gabi po, Tita Evelyn and Tita Connie.
Good evening, magandang gabi sa inyong lahat.
Magandang gabi din po, Tita Connie.
Yeah, hi Rhea, hi Ish, magandang gabi sa inyong lahat at sa lahat ng mga tagapakinig ng Radyo Migrante sa CHRY 105.5 FM. Maraming salamat sa pag-imbita sa akin na maging tagapagsalita. Isa sa mga tagapagsalita ngayong gabi.
Yeah, so we'll greet you first. Happy Women's Day.
Yes.
Yes.
At maraming salamat din po sa pagpapaunlak ninyo sa amin na kayo makapanayam dito sa Radyo Migrante.
It is a pleasure.
Thank you. So siguro po, bago tayo magsimula, may ipa-play natin yung isang clip ng history o yung kasaysayan ng International Women's Day. Nagmula po ito kay Vice Chairperson Grace Mahinay ng Gabriela, Southern Mindanao Region.
Today, March 8, 2014, is the 104th anniversary of the celebration of the International Working Women's Day. It started in New York City on March 8, 1857, when workers went on strike after their garment factory was put on fire, and women and children were killed during that fire. They were not able to escape from the fire because their doors were locked during the night. They were not able to get out of the factory. After that, the workers went to the street and protested the 12-hour working hour every day, and they demanded for a lower working hours. They also called for increase of their wages, and they demanded to stop child labor. They were violently dispersed. 50 years later, March 8, 1908, women workers took to the streets again and protested against unfair labor practices, their dismal living working condition, and they had the same demands: higher wages, an end to the 12 working hours, end to child labor, and the betterment of their working condition. But then again, they were violently dispersed by the state. So they again took to the streets 2 years later and demanded the same calls, including the right of women to vote and be voted. So these 4 demands were consistently taken by women in their demands. And in 1910, the Socialist Party of the Russian Socialist Party, led by Clara Zetkin, had filed a resolution to make March 8 as the International Working Women's Day, to recognize the effort and the struggle of women for the betterment of the workers. So, since then, March 8 was celebrated and commemorated in Europe and in America as the International Working Women's Day. It was also adopted by the United Nations, and later, certain women groups have consciously dropped the Working Women's Day by celebrating March 8 as the International Women's Day. So there was a celebration and demands that only evolved or revolved around women-specific issues. But in the Philippines, the International Working Women's Day was first celebrated in 1971 through the efforts of the Makabayang Kilusan ng Bagong Kababaihan, an all-women's organization. But when martial law was declared and Makibaka was forced to go underground, it was not until 1984 when Gabriela was established that March 8 was again celebrated. So until now, we still have the same demands, and we have consciously put into the consciousness of every woman and all the Filipino democratic loving Filipino that March 8 is an International Working Women's Day. Meaning, it is a day for the women who are so-called anak pawis, who are so-called from the basic masses. So, from 1984, Gabriela has led the March 8 Working Women's Day. And we can see that we still have the same demands. Higher wages for our workers, land for the landless farmers, increase of salaries for our government employees and teachers and even the private employees. So, but now we are very conscious also of stopping violence against women and children, which is more oppressive to the basic masses of women, like the farmers, the urban poor, and the workers. So we continue to shout and demand for equality, for land, for democracy, for sovereignty, and for the workers' rights.
And so yun si Grace Mahinay, Vice Chairperson ng Gabriela Southern Mindanao Region. So Tita Connie and Tita Evelyn, siguro very briefly, first of all, we know that you both celebrated Women's International Day kahapon. Did you both dance, first of all? And pangalawa ay pahapiyaw lang po, ano po yung history ng women's movement in the Philippines?
Sabi nga ni Grace Mahina, yung history ng women's movement in the Philippines is very much similar to the history na sinabi niya, no, doon sa generally worldwide in terms of the women rising up and uniting and consolidating their ranks to fight for their rights, ano. And I really like the way they said it, International Working Women's Day. Kasi the way it is now, yung International Women's Day, medyo nawala yung klase. Na kung tutuusin, inano niya, yung na-watered down yung struggle ng working women doon sa paglaban at saka ng karapatan at saka yung equality in terms of access to work, access to health care at saka yung access to elected position sa public, sa government. So sa Pilipinas, matagal na yung history ng mga kabaihan sa paglaban. Actually, panahon pa ito ni Gabriela Silang during the Spaniards time and now, na si Gabriela Silang isang babae pero sumama siya dun sa pakikibaka ng mamamayang Pilipino para labanan yung colonization ng Spaniards.
Na parang ang nakikita ko rin, nag-agree ako doon sa comment ni Connie na parang nawala yung class struggle ng women kasi natabunan ng yung general call ng international na women inclusive, pero hindi natin nakikita na within women there's also a class struggle within the women. Kung titingnan nga yung sinabi ni Connie na historically doon sa Pilipinas ang pag-umpisa ng pag-celebrate ng International Working Women was from the masses, not from the top. So I agree na dapat ibalik natin yung sa bagay dito sa Montreal. Ang nakikita namin na event namin kasi ang event namin ang nagpaplan ng International Women's Activity dito sa Montreal ay yung women of diverse origin. So yung component, yung coalition na yan, puro mga ethnic origin women na mga working women. Walang merong petit bourgeois, pero pagdating dito sa North America, iba na rin yung nila yung ng mga immigrant women.
Tita Evelyn, just hold on that kasi we'll be talking about yun sa Filipino Canadian situation later on, but now we'll just play a clip of a popular music during the 70s, I believe. This is by Inang Laya, and this is called Babae. And for our listeners, just tune in because the lyrics of the song is very comprehensive. It talks about different women throughout the Philippine history.
di marunong na lumaban. Kaaptihay, bakit iniluluha? Mga babae, kayo ba'y sadyang mahina? Kayo ba ang mga Cinderella na lalaki ang tanging pag-asa? Kayo nga ba ang mga nena na hanap buhay ang pagpuputa? Mga babae, kayo ba'y sadyang pangkama? Ang ating isip ay buksan at lipunay pag-aralan. Paano nahubog inyong isipan at tanggapin kayo'y mga libangan? Mga babae, ito nga ba'y kapalaran? Bakit ba mayroong mga Gabriela, mga Teresa at tandang Sora na di umasa sa luhat awa? Sila'y nagsipag hawak ng sandata, nakikilaban, ang ngiti na'y lumaya. Bakit ba mayroong mga Lisa, mga Liliosa at mga Lorena na di natakot makibaka at ngayoy marami ang kasama? Mga babae, ang ngiti na'y lumaya. Ang ating isip ay buksan at lipunay pag-aralan. Paano nahubog inyong isipan at tanggapin kayo'y mga libangan? Mga babae, ito nga ba'y kapalaran? Bakit ba mayroong mga Lisa, mga Liliosa at mga Lorena na di natakot makibaka at ngayoy marami ang kasama? Mga babae, ang ngiti na'y lumaya. Mga babae, ang ngiti na'y lumaya.
At yun po, ang babae by Inang Laya. So, Tita Connie, Lola Evelyn, pumili kayo ng isang babae doon na nabanggit doon sa awitin at maybe makapag ano kayo, latag kayo sa mga listeners natin kung ano po ang naging contribution nila sa Philippine Women's Movement.
Oo, nakalola.
Diba? Mauna na ako. Ikaw dyan ang Ako, hindi ako masyadong sa... Anyways, si Lorena, ang isang napili ko. Actually, ang pagkakaalam ko, si Lorena ay isang aktivista na estudyante noon na nakipaglaban at naging membro ng Makibaka. At siya ay nakikipaglaban sa karapatan at katarungan ng mga kababaihan, comprehensively, hindi lang wages or working condition or something, pati sa violence against women at saka yung rights ng women sa Pilipinas na kasi sa experience ko doon sa Pilipinas, ang noong from teenager ako hanggang nag 30 years old ako bago ako pumunta dito, ay ang obserbasyon ko at experience ko ay talaga ang mga babae sa atin noon ay second, parang kung baga in a private family, wala kang boses. Depende rin yata sa class status ng babae. I don't know exactly on the bourgeoisie class kung sila ay may boses sa loob ng pamilya nila, but sa class origin ko ay talagang suppress kami, oppress ang women. So ang pinaglaban ni Lorena ay yung oppression ng women sa Pilipinas.
Tita Connie?
nabanggit sa inangyaya ay si Gabriela, no? At saka nabanggit ko na rin siya kanina. Ngayon si Liliosa Hilaw. Actually, si Lorena at saka si Lily were both student activists during the Marcos regime. And they were arrested and killed and murdered during their si Lily during her detention under the custody of the military. Na ang pinaglalaban, katulad din ni Lorena, ang pinaglalaban ni Lily at the time ay yung karapatan ng mga estudyante at saka kung paano ang mga kababaihang estudyante is rooted doon sa community na kung saan working class yung mga families na yung pinagmumulan, ano. So yung participation ng dalawang martyred women na to na student women ay yun actually din ang nag-inspire sa akin para maging student activist yung way back during my university days sa Pilipinas. Kasi yung pinaglalaban nila during the Marcos regime and during my time and even until now are still there. Sabi ko nga kanina, kailangan balikan yung working women sa pag-celebrate ng International Women's Day. Kasi it does not necessarily mean na kapag pareho kayong babae, ay pareho ang karapatan nyo, pareho yung access nyo sa lahat ng opportunities, healthcare, and so on. Kasi we should not forget, for example, in the Philippines, we've had 2 women presidents. Yung si Cory Aquino, the former the late Cory Aquino, and now Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. And if you look at dun sa track record nila and performance nila, kung paano nilift up yung karapatan ng kababaihan during their administration, you can easily say na wala talaga. If you look at, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's record in terms of human rights violations and how women, particularly were being targeted dito sa at the time yung Oplan Kalayaan, Bantay Kalayaan, and now Oplan Bayanihan, these are all the same anti-insurgency campaign that pretty much targets women who are involved in progressive and militant activism towards achieving, liberation at saka equality ng mga kababaihan. Hindi lang sa Pilipinas, sa sa pangkabuuan. Kasi kung titignan natin kahit sa ibang mga countries na kung saan they are undergoing conflict, women are being used as weapons of war. Diba? Sa Congo, for example, sa Colombia, and some other countries. And again, going back to the Philippines, yung mga under the current Oplan Bayanihan, ang mga soldiers are embedding themselves in communities, and for them to be accepted by the community, ang una nilang tinatarget ay yung manligaw sa mga kababaihan mula sa komunidad. Kung hindi nila madala sa panliligaw, nire-rape nila at ginagawa nilang how do you call that? Yung ginagamit ba nila para yung kapamilya o asawa o mga anak na pinagsususpetsahan nilang members of progressive organizations ay mapalabas, mapasurface, or something like that. So yung kalagayan ng mga kababaihan ng panahon ni Lorena, even panahon ni Gabriela, ni Lorena, tapos ni Lily, hanggang sa kasalukuyan, marami tayong women political prisoners in the Philippines right now. Ay patuloy pa rin.
Now, dumako naman po tayo, Tita Connie and Lola Evelyn, dito sa kinatatayuan natin dito sa Canada. I guess, starting with Lola Evelyn, ano yung relevance po ngayon today of the International Women's Day, particular dyan sa Montreal? Ano po yung mga siguro issue na dinadala po ngayon or nadala kahapon sa event?
Yung dinala ng women's of diverse origin kahapon ay yung precarity ng women's workers. it's about the women workers ng mga migrants na ang kanilang status ay precarious, na kahit na anong gawin nilang laban, nandyan yung mga regulations na pwede nilang ipaglaban yung karapatan nila, yung mga abuses, yung mga exploitation, yung mga discrimination, but still nahihirapan sila makipaglaban dahil access to justice is very difficult on their as their on their economic status. Na sila yung mga women workers na nagfo-fall into the cracks ng system, na hindi sila pwedeng maka-access sa legal aid dahil doon sa kanilang income. But sa income naman nila na minimum wage, cannot afford to pay lawyers. So, kahit nandyan ang protection ng sinasabing Labor Commission, it takes years before it can be resolved. Pero kahit during the period ng resolution ng kanilang pag-iimbestiga, in the end nagsettle yung, at una ini-intimidate nila yung complainant, pagkatapos in the end nakikipag-settle yung employer, but then kung settlement ang resulta, their name is cleared kasi wala sa public record. It was settled out of court. So wala talagang protection ang mga women worker, na lalo na ang migrants.
And for Tita Connie, I guess same question. What is the relevance of International Working Women's Day today? And also you can talk about Kaiwana Tejada, her being one of the most outspoken migrant women who fought for her justice to stay here in Canada, and you were part of the campaign during that time.
Yes, actually, nung bago tayo nag-spark on the air, I was thinking of Juana Tejada kasi yesterday was her 5th year death anniversary. Si Juana Tejada ay isang live-in caregiver dito sa Canada na nagkaroon ng cancer, and because of her cancer, she was denied 2 times by the Canadian government dun sa kanyang application for permanent residency. Nakumpleto niya yung 24 months live-in requirement, and once she applied for her first application, na-diagnose na siya ng cancer. So, twice denied yung kanyang application because of her medical inadmissibility under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act ng Canada. No? So, noong 2008, we campaigned for her na makuha niya ang kanyang permanent residence, and also for the Canadian government to provide her with medical with health care, kasi at the time nahinto na rin yung kanyang medical, yung health care benefits, kasi wala na siyang status. In fact, pinauuwi na siya ng Canadian government. And what we raised during yung campaign namin was the fact that, how women, particularly women migrant workers, are being treated as commodities. Kasi parang, di ba, yung commodity, kapag bumili ka sa Canadian Tire or na isang bagay, kapag defective yung bagay na yon, you can return it at mare-reimburse ka. So ganun ang nangyari sa kanya, no? Na defective siya, so the Canadian government was sending her home kasi wala siyang access dito sa In fact, she was called as a burden sa Canadian health or health care. We were successful doon sa campaign na yon kasi si Juana Tejada rin, she was telling me na this fight is not only for me, especially not for me because I'm dying anyway. But it is for the women na nasa kalagayan niya at nasa nasa temporary status na magkaroon ng access kahit may sakit na sila at ipakita sa Canadians, yung government position. We were successful doon sa kampanya sa kanya. In fact, she left as a legacy. Ito yung tinatawag na Juana Tejada bill. Yung Juana Tejada law, na kung saan supposedly ang mga live-in caregivers na nandito ngayon sa Canada are not to go through second medical examination when they are in the process of applying for their permanent residence. Ang problema nga lang, may discretionary power pa rin ang immigration officer to subject them for second medical examination. So, I think we have to go back and reiterate in a campaign na dapat hindi ito ginagawa kasi we fought for this already. And I think this is the yung problema dito sa I would not say problema, but ito yung natin sa struggle ng working women. Na even if at this present time, people are saying, governments are saying na malaki na yung hinakbang, yung improvement, yung achievement as far as fighting for women's rights, is concerned. Actually, we have to be careful kasi ang iba dyan ay token. Kasi kung titignan mo, when they say, halimbawa, dito sa Canada again, yung support and funding to end violence against women. Actually, this has been cut. Yung mga support and services and so on have been cut. So I've been saying, governments are complicit doon sa continuous suffering and inequality faced by women. Kasi there are no support provided para talaga ma-implement ito at maging successful. So for us activists, we have to be vigilant and we have to be critical kung nasaan na nga ba talaga tayo as far as moving forward and pushing forward for the rights ng kababaihan.
Tita Connie, let's go on break first. Babalikan namin kayo ni Lola Evelyn. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you po. Kayo rin po ay nakikinig dito lamang sa Radyo Migrante sa CHRY 105.5 FM, your leading source for diversity. Maaari nyo rin kami pakinggan sa www.rdo.to/CHRY, Bell 5973, Rogers Digital Cable 945 o sa tunein.com kung may mga smartphones kayo. Magbabalik po kami matapos po ang patalastas na ito.
Radio Migrante every Sunday night from 9 to 10 p.m. on CHRY 105.5 FM.
At tayo nagbabalik dito lamang sa Radyo Migrante sa CHRY 105.5 FM, your leading source for diversity. So, bago po tayo nag-break ay naikwento ni na Lola Evelyn at ni Tita Connie yung relevance ng IWD sa modern context dun nga sa foreign domestic workers, and also nabanggit din yung Juana Tejada law kung saan nagmula ito sa struggle ni Juana Tejada bilang isang dating live-in caregiver na sumakabalang buhay na 5 years ago at namatay nga siya yung anniversary which was the International Women's Day. So siguro Tita Connie, Lola Evelyn, ang tanong po ngayon ay from the struggles that the women have started 100 years ago, how do you carry these forward?
Okay. Para sa akin ay lalong tumitindi dapat ang working women's movement internationally. Kasi lalong tumitindi rin ang pahirap nila sa mga working women, lalo na sa mga migrant workers sa ibang bansa. Even doon sa atin, walang trabaho. Kaya nagkakahiwa-hiwalay ang mga pamilya dahil dyan sa kawalang katrabahuan sa atin. Ayun ang dapat natin itaguyod na struggle na magbago yung sistema dahil ang sistema talaga siya yung nagpapahirap sa mga kababaihan. Double na pagpapahirap. So kailangan double din ang movement, ang struggle ng mga women.
Tita Connie?
Bago kita sagutin, related na rin doon sa Nung nagsasalita kanina si Grace, nabanggit niya yung triangle of fire na nangyari sa sa New York, na kung saan more than 140 women garment workers were killed in that fire kasi hindi sila makalabas, yung ganyan. If you remember, a year ago, merong nangyari din, hindi fire, kundi bumagsak yung building sa Bangladesh, na kung saan daang kababaihang manggagawa, yung garment workers were also killed in that accident. So 103 years ago, nangyayari pa rin. So for me, it's a stark reality na we're not there yet as far as really fighting for women's rights at saka yung protection and so on. So isa yun. Tapos pangalawa, how do we carry forward etong struggle for women's emancipation? Ang masasabi ko lang, we can achieve small victories, and I think we should be happy, but let us not be deceived or lulled into complacency by those small victories. For as far as the current system is supported and fueled by imperialism, na kung saan ang never-ending or insatiable ng profit, yung greed, hindi maaalis sa ganitong kalagayan ang mga kababaihan. So a global movement to dismantle itong imperialism or imperialist power is the main or the ultimate target ng ating movement. Gusto ko rin sabihin na ito rin ang dahilan kung bakit itinayo yung International Women's Alliance, na kung saan lahat ng mga kababaihan, progresibo at militanteng mga kababaihan all around the globe, formed the International Women's Alliance, which had its first Congress sa Pilipinas noong 2011, which me and Tita Evelyn were there participating at that historical formation ng International Women's Alliance. So yung pinaglalaban ng alliance na to, kailangan nating dalhin sa ang sulok ng daigdig ng tayo nandun, kasi at the current ng population, there are more women than men. Pero when it comes to access at saka sahod doon sa trabaho, ay hindi pa rin pantay. Nung nung ginawa yung celebrate yung International Working Women's Day dito sa Toronto, I brought with me one of my son and his 3 kids, including si Lauren, yung aking granddaughter. And in that march, alam mo, ano siya dun sa, nag-chance kahit dito sa bahay bago sila umalis. And I told them na mag-guest ako dito sa radio about women.
Oh, wow.
She started chanting yung what do we want? Justice. When do we want? Yan. Tapos yung women's power. Tapos nagsasayaw siya yung go up, go down. There is a women's movement in this town. Yung ganun ba? So, I think natutuwa ako na makita yun sa kanya, but at the same time, kasi meron ng initial awareness. Pero siguro sa kanila, sa family, dahil siya yung panggitna, yung responsibilidad na ibinibigay natin sa ating mga kababaihan at the early age, di ba? Pero hindi natin sila tinuturuan na lubaban at ipakipaglaban ang kanilang karapatan. I think to ensure that in the future generation, meron tayong mga militanteng kababaihan, ngayon pa lang turuan na natin sila. So, when I say that, I mean yung awareness raising, education and so forth could even start at kids in junior kinder, in senior kinder, in elementary, in high school. Kasi kapag dala-dala mo na yung ganung knowledge, yung ganung awareness, kahit saan ka nandun, paglalaban mo yun eh.
Yeah, so on that note, Tita Connie and Lola Evelyn, how can people contact Pinay and International Women's Alliance? Lola Evelyn?
Ang Pinay, makukontak ng lahat through email or sa Pinay Quebec Facebook page, saka sa telepono namin na 514-364-9833.
Tita Connie?
Hi. Alam mo, Ish, I'm very proud to say na ang General Secretary ng International Women's Alliance is based here in Canada at nandyan siya sa Quebec. Ang problema nga lang, Tita Evelyn, you can help me kasi hindi ko matandaan yung email address where, they can be contacted. So anyway, dito sa Toronto, we also have the Independent Women Workers Association. Meron silang Facebook and so on.
Okay, so we'll post that on Radyo Migrante Facebook page. So magtatapos na po ang ating programa. Maraming salamat, Evelyn Kalugay of Pinay, Quebec, and Connie Sorio of International Women's Alliance. Tita Evelyn, Tita Connie, maraming salamat po.
Yeah. At maraming salamat din sa inyo, Rhea at Ish, at sa lahat ng tagapakinig ng Radyo Migrante.
Maraming salamat din po sa inyo at mabuhay kayo. Okay, so we only have 1 minute before we end the show. So Ish, one announcement and then papost natin yung iba sa Radyo Migrante Facebook page.
Just briefly, there's free tax clinic by the end of the month, Caregivers Action Center. That will be posted on the Radyo Migrante Facebook page. But for now, we have the Salina Selfie na Migrante Alberta Consular Services campaign. People are invited to be part of the overwhelming support to have a permanent consular office in Alberta soon. So how to participate? Take a selfie of yours with a piece of paper that says, "We need a consular office in Alberta now." Share it to your friends, tag your friends along as well, and post it on the Migrante Alberta Facebook page or send it to their email migrantealberta@gmail.com or go to the website consularservicecampaignalberta.wordpress.com.
Actually, nagtatapos na po ang ating programa dito sa Radyo Migrante sa CHRY 105.5 FM, your leading source for diversity. Up next ay si Roy Green and Lady Sol of Odyssey. So, ngayong buwan po ito ay Women's Month dito po sa Radyo Migrante. So, stay tuned po for next Sunday's episode. So, maraming salamat at magandang gabi.